My brother and mother demanded my son serve as their unpaid landscaper, claiming he owed them for their affection. They didn't realize I was the only reason they still had a lawn to mow. I smiled, drove home, and canceled the mortgage transfer. At midnight, their world crumbled. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The nausea hit me before the check did. It wasn't the eggs Benedict, which were rubbery and lukewarm, nor was it the cloying scent of my mother's cheap perfume that seemed to hang heavy in the humid patio air. It was the realization, sudden, sharp, and absolutely devastating, that the people sitting across from me didn't love us. They didn't even like us. To them, my son and I were nothing more than walking, breathing ATMs with a pulse. I looked at my son, Noah. He was sitting with his posture perfect, hands folded in his lap, trying so hard to be the dutiful grandson and nephew. At 16, Noah was everything I could have hoped for: an honors student, the varsity soccer captain, and possessor of a heart so kind it often worried me. He was currently nodding politely as his uncle, my older brother Derek, droned on about his latest investment opportunity involving imported synthetic leather and blockchain. "It's a sure thing, Liz," Derek said, stabbing a sausage link with aggressive confidence. "I just need a little bridge capital. 5, maybe 10 grand, you'd make it back in a month." I took a slow sip of my iced tea, the condensation cold against my fingertips. "We've discussed this, Derek. My finances are tied up in Noah's college fund. I can't liquidate anything right now." It was a lie, of course. As a senior forensic accountant, my finances were liquid, organized, and robust. But I had learned years ago that giving Derek money was like throwing gold bars into a volcano. It disappeared instantly and only resulted in more heat. Derek's face tightened. The charming, salesman veneer cracked just enough to show the petulant child beneath. He looked to our mother, Joyce, for backup. Joyce dabbed the corner of her mouth with a napkin, her eyes narrowing at me. "Elizabeth, you really should support your brother's dreams. Family helps family. That's what your father would have wanted." The mention of my father was her favorite weapon. It usually worked. Today, however, I was running on 4 hours of sleep after a brutal week auditing a corporation suspected of embezzlement, and my patience was thinner than the paper napkin in her hand. "I help plenty, Mom," I said, my voice steady. "I brought the wine today. I paid for brunch. I think that's support." Derek let out a scoff that sounded like a bark. "Brunch, right, big spender." He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest. He looked me up and down, then shifted his gaze to Noah. A cruel, calculating smirk spread across his face. "You know," Derek said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming deceptively casual, "since you're so tight with the purse strings, maybe you can contribute in other ways. Or rather, the boy can." Noah looked up, blinking. "Me, Uncle Derek." "Yeah, you," Derek said, gesturing around the sprawling backyard of the family estate. The grass was getting long, the flower beds were overrun with weeds. It was a big property, and maintaining it cost a fortune I knew they didn't have. The landscapers quit, said something about late payments, which is a lie, but whatever. "I need this place looking sharp for a potential investor meeting next week. You can come over. Tuesdays and Saturdays, mow, weed, trim the hedges, the works." I felt a spike of adrenaline. "Derek, Noah has soccer practice on Tuesdays and SAT prep on Saturdays. He doesn't have time to be your gardener." "He can make time," Derek snapped, his casual demeanor vanishing. "He's young, he's fit. It'll build character. God knows he needs it, living in that bubble you've built for him." I went to speak to shut this down immediately, but my mother cut me off. She placed her hand over Derek's, patting it soothingly, while glaring at Noah. "Derek is right," Joyce said, her tone final. "Noah is part of this family. He enjoys this house, doesn't he? He eats the food when he comes over. He sits on the furniture." "Mom, we visit once a month," I said, my voice rising. "And I bring the groceries." "It doesn't matter." Joyce slammed her hand on the table, rattling the silverware. "He owes us, for all we've done, for the stability this family provides. He can mow the lawn. It's the least he can do to pay back his debt to his elders. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at Noah. His face had gone pale. He looked from his grandmother to his uncle, confusion and hurt warring in his eyes. He wasn't seeing family anymore, he was seeing creditors demanding payment for a debt he didn't know he had incurred. Noah stammered, I guess I could skip practice. No, I whispered. See, Derek grinned, picking up his mimosa. Good lad, start this Tuesday, and don't be late, I hate laziness. I looked at them. I looked at Derek, wearing a watch I knew was a fake, sitting in a house he didn't pay for. I looked at Joyce, draped in jewelry I had bought her for Christmas, demanding manual labor from my teenage son. Something inside me, something crucial and structural, simply snapped. It wasn't a loud break. It was the quiet, terrifying sound of a bridge collapsing into the sea. I didn't yell, I didn't flip the table. I just smiled. It was a tight, dangerous smile, though they were too arrogant to notice the difference. Okay, I said softly. Okay, Derek asked, suspicious. Okay, I repeated, if you think that's fair. It's more than fair, Joyce huffed. It's justice. I stood up, signaling Noah to do the same. We have to go, I have some administrative work to catch up on. Don't forget Tuesday, kid, Derek called out as we walked away. As we reached the car, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. It was the calm of a coroner standing over a corpse, knowing exactly cause of death. They wanted to talk about debts. They wanted to talk about who owed who. They had no idea. The betrayal of seeing my son treated like an indentured servant was worse than the diagnosis itself. The diagnosis that my family was a cancer I finally had to cut out. The drive home was excruciatingly quiet. Usually, Noah and I would debrief after family gatherings. We'd joke about Derek's absurd outfits or Mom's tendency to overcook the roast. But today, the silence was heavy, thick with the humiliation Noah was trying to digest. I gripped the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked under my palms. My chest felt tight, a physical manifestation of the rage boiling in my blood. Every time I blinked, I saw Derek smirk. He owes us. Mom, Noah's voice was small, cracking slightly. I glanced at him. He was staring out the window, watching the suburbs blur by. Yes, honey. Do I really have to go over there on Tuesday? Coach said if I miss another practice, I might lose the starting spot. My heart broke for him. He was so conditioned to please, to follow the rules, that he was willing to sacrifice his passion because his grandmother told him he was in debt to her. No, I said firmly. You are not going there on Tuesday. You are never mowing that lawn, Noah. He looked at me, relieved but confused. But Grandma said. Grandma is confused, I said, trying to keep the venom out of my voice for his sake. She forgets how things actually work. You don't owe them anything, Noah. Not a minute of your time, not a drop of your sweat. But Uncle Derek said I need to pay them back for being family. Uncle Derek is a liar, I said, the words slipping out before I could check them. I took a breath. Noah, listen to me. You are a child. You are my child. Your only job is to go to school, play soccer, and be a decent human being. You do not exist to service their ego or their property. We pulled into the driveway of our modest townhouse. It wasn't a sprawling estate like the one Joyce and Derek lived in. It was half the size, but it was ours. It was clean, it was peaceful, and most importantly, it was paid for with honest work. As we walked inside, my phone buzzed in my purse. I ignored it until I was in the kitchen, pouring a glass of water to wash down 2 aspirin. I pulled the phone out. A text from Derek. Derek, make sure the kid brings his own gloves. I don't want him using mine. And tell him to be careful around the rose bushes. Mom will freak if he tramples them. I stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. He wasn't just asking for a favor, he was managing his new employee. He was treating my son, his own nephew, with less respect than he'd treat a hired contractor. I didn't reply. I couldn't. If I typed what I wanted to say, I would tip my hand. I walked into my home office and sat down at my desk. My workspace was my sanctuary. 3 monitors, a high-speed processor, and access to the kind of financial databases that could reconstruct a person's life from a few credit card swipes. This was my domain. Out there in the emotional mess of logged into my personal banking portal, I navigated to the Scheduled Transfers tab. There it was, the entry that had been a permanent fixture in my financial life for 6 years. To First National Mortgage Servicing/reference, J. Harper Estate. Amount, $4,850. Frequency, I had watched that money leave my account and vanish into the black hole of my mother's vanity, all to keep her and Derek in a house they had no business living in. They forgot one crucial thing, I whispered to the empty room. They thought power came from the loudest voice at the table. They thought authority came from age or gender. But they had forgotten the golden rule of the world they were trying so desperately to pretend they belonged to. He who holds the gold makes the rules. And tonight, the gold was staying right here. To understand why I was shaking as I hovered my mouse over the cancel button, you have to understand the history. You have to understand the carefully constructed lie that was the Harper family legacy. My father had been a good man, but a terrible businessman. When he died 10 years ago, he left behind a massive estate, a heavy mortgage, and very little life insurance. My mother, Joyce, was a socialite who had never worked a day in her life. She defined herself by that house, the columns, the pool, the prestige of the address. To lose it would have been, in her eyes, a fate worse without the 60-hour work weeks. He bounced from startup to consultancy, each one a thinly veiled scheme that relied on investors he inevitably disappointed. At 40 years old, he had no assets, no credit score, and no shame. He had moved back into the big house, temporarily, 8 years ago and never left. For a long time, I tried to be the good daughter. I was the one who went to school, got the degree, passed the CPA exam, and specialized in forensic accounting. I built a career hunting down hidden assets in divorce cases and corporate fraud. I was good at it. I was well paid. 6 years ago, the bank had come calling. The house was weeks away from foreclosure. Joyce had wept at my kitchen table, clutching my hands, begging me not to let them take your father's legacy. Derek had paced the room, blaming the economy, the government, the banks, everyone but himself. So I stepped in. I made a deal. I would pay the mortgage directly. I didn't give the money to Joyce or Derek because I knew they'd spend it on clothes or car leases. I set up a direct auto pay from my primary account to the mortgage servicer. It's just until Derek's company takes off, Mom had promised. I'll pay you back with interest, Liz, Derek had sworn. 6 years, over $300,000. And in exchange, is on Tuesdays. VIP bottle service at clubs on Thursdays. A lease on a Range Rover that cost more than my mortgage, holding a cigar, sitting on my patio furniture with the caption, King of the Castle. Sunday vibes. King of the Castle, I muttered, my voice dripping with disdain. The man was a parasite in a polyester suit. He had no idea that the ground beneath his feet was held up by my checkbook. He thought he was untouchable because he was the man of the house. He thought I was weak because I was quiet. But in my line of work, we have a saying, the numbers don't lie, but they can certainly kill. I looked at the clock. 7:45 p.m. The transfer would trigger at midnight. If I didn't stop it, another $4,850 would vanish, and Noah would be expected to mow their lawn on Tuesday. If I did stop it. The mortgage was in Joyce's name. She was the legal borrower, but she had zero income. Derek had zero reported income. If the payment bounced, the bank's automated system would flag the account. T immediately suddenly feeling electric. The trap was set. The safety net was gone. Now, all I had to do was wait for the fall. Monday morning arrived with a silence that felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. I sat in my office. The notification from my bank had come through at 8, 00 a.m. sharp. Scheduled transfer to First National Mortgage Servicing. Canceled by user. The money was still in my account. The mortgage payment was officially late. Now it was a game of chicken. I knew Joyce wouldn't notice. She hadn't looked at a bank statement since 1998. Checking the accounts to siphon off gas money or lunch funds from Mom's pension, he would see the red flag. If he was sleeping in until noon, which was his standard operating procedure, I had a few more hours. I needed to use that time. I wasn't just cutting the knuckles. Let's see what you've really been up to. I started with public records. As a forensic accountant, I had access to databases and I saw the liens. My heart hammered against my ribs. There wasn't just the primary mortgage I had been paying. There was a second lien filed 6 months ago, a mechanic's lien from a luxury pool installation company. $14,000 outstanding balance. I frowned. The pool hadn't been renovated. It was a green, algae-filled swamp the last time I looked. Why was there a lien for a renovation that never happened? I dug deeper. I pulled the court filings. The contract had been signed by Joyce Harper. I pulled up the digital copy of the signature on the invoice. It was a shaky, looped scrawl. It looked like my mother's signature, but there was a hesitation mark at the top of the J. A hesitation mark I had seen on forged checks in a dozen embezzlement cases. Derek. He had commissioned a pool renovation, likely taken the deposit or the refund for materials, and never paid the contractor. He had cashed out the equity of a project that didn't exist, leaving the house, my mother's house, on the hook for the debt. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. This was worse than laziness. This was fraud. I picked up my office phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Miller Investigations, a gravelly voice answered. Frank, it's Elizabeth Harper. Liz, long time. You catching bad guys at the big firm now? Something like that, I said, my voice tight. I need a favor. A personal one. I need a full asset and liability trace on a specific individual. And I need a background check on a registered LLC called Titan Global Enterprises. Titan Global sounds fake. It is. It's my brother's company. Ah, Frank said, the humor dropping from his voice. Family trouble. You have no idea. I need to know everything, Frank. Credit cards, hidden accounts, gambling debts, civil suits. If he's bought a pack of gum on credit in the last 5 years, I want to know about it. I'm on it. Give me 24 hours. I hung up, my hand shaking slightly. I wasn't just a sister refusing to enable them anymore. I was an investigator building a C.S. against a criminal who happened to share my DNA. The phone on my desk buzzed. It wasn't Frank. It wasn't a client. It was Mom. It was 11:30 a.m. Derek must have woken up. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. I watched the name Mom flash on the screen, a word that used to mean safety and now meant obligation. I didn't answer. I simply turned the phone over, face down, and went back to work. I had a trap to spring, and I wasn't going to let them yell at me before I was ready to deliver the news in person. Tuesday arrived, gray and drizzly. It was the day Noah was supposed to report for duty. I left work early, driving my sedate Volvo through the rain-slicked streets toward the affluent suburb where my mother's house sat like a decaying monument to a bygone era. My phone had been blowing up for 24 hours, 37 missed calls from Joyce, 12 text messages from Derek, ranging from call Mom now to we need to talk about the bank error. They still thought it was an error. They thought the ATM had just glitched. The arrogance of it was almost impressive. I pulled into the long, winding driveway. The grass was indeed long, tufts of weeds poking through the gravel. The hedges were overgrown, clawing at the sides of the house like desperate fingers. I parked the car. I saw the front curtain twitch. Before I could even reach the steps, the front door flew open. Derek stood there. He was wearing a silk bathrobe that had seen better days and holding a coffee mug that said boss. He looked past me, scanning the driveway. "Where is he?" Derek demanded, not even bothering with a hello. "Where's the kid? The rain is letting up, he can get the edging done at least." I walked up the steps slowly, my heels clicking on the slate. I stopped 2 feet from him. I was 5'6" and he was 6'1", yet for the first time in my life, I felt like I was the one looking down. "Noah isn't coming, Derek," I said, my voice calm, professional, devoid of the sisterly warmth I used to force. "What do you mean he's not coming?" Derek spat, his face flushing red. "We had a deal. Sunday brunch, you agreed." "I agreed to do what was fair," I corrected him. "And I decided that my son being your indentured servant wasn't fair." "Fair?" Derek laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You want to talk about fair? Fair is family helping family, which reminds me you need to fix the bank thing. Mom's been hysterical all night. The mortgage payment bounced. Some glitch on your end." He held out his hand, palm up, as if expecting me to hand him cash right there. "Just write a check today. I'll run it to the bank for her." "It wasn't a glitch," I said. Derek froze, his hand slowly lowered. "What?" "I canceled the payment, Derek. I went into the portal and I clicked cancel." The color drained from his face, leaving him a sallow, sickly gray. You can't do that." "I can, it's my money. It's my account." "But the house," he shouted, stepping closer, trying to use his size to intimidate me. "If we miss a payment, the bank goes into acceleration. We're on the probationary list, you know that." "I do know that. You should have thought about that before you told my son he owed you for his existence." Joyce appeared in the doorway behind him, clutching a handkerchief. She looked frail, her makeup smudged. "Elizabeth, what is he saying? You stopped the payment? Why would you do such a wicked thing?" "Because I'm done, Mom," I said, looking past Derek to address her. "I'm done paying for a house I'm not welcome in. I'm done funding a lifestyle for a brother who treats my son like a landscaper." "He's your brother," Joyce wailed. "He's having a hard time. He just needs a little more time for his investments to mature." "His investments?" I laughed, a cold, sharp sound. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper, the printout of the mechanic's lien for the phantom pool. I held it up. "Is this the investment, Derek? The $14,000 you stole from the pool company? Or maybe it's the fact that you forged Mom's signature on the contract?" Derek's eyes bulged. He snatched at the paper, but I pulled it back. "I didn't steal anything," he stammered, sweat beading on his upper lip. That was a misunderstanding. The contractor was a crook. I'm suing him." "There's no lawsuit filed, Derek. I checked," I said, my voice cutting through his lies like a scalpel. "There is, however, a lien on this house. A house that is now 1 month behind on its mortgage. A house that has zero equity left because you've drained it all." Joyce looked between us, her hands trembling. "Derek, what is she talking about? What pool?" "She's lying, Mom," Derek yelled, his voice cracking. "She's jealous. She's always been jealous of me. She wants us on the street so she can feel superior." He turned back to me, his face twisted into a mask of pure malice. "You fix this, Liz. You fix thy S right now, or I swear to God." "Or you'll what?" I stepped closer, entering his personal space. "You'll fire me. You'll cut me out of the will. There's nothing left to cut me out of, Derek. You spent it all." I turned to walk away. "If you walk away," Derek screamed at my back, "don't you ever come back. You are dead to us." I paused at the car door. I looked back at the rotting house, the overgrown lawn, and the 2 people standing on the porch, one a predator, one a willing victim. "I know," I said, "that's the point." I got in the car and drove away. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally, after 42 years, saying the words that needed to be said. But I knew it wasn't over. Derek was cornered, and a cornered rat doesn't just surrender, it bites. The silence lasted exactly 3 hours. By 6:00 p.m. that evening, the assault began. It started with text messages to Noah. "Uncle Derek, your mother is having a mental breakdown. She's trying to make Grandma homeless. You need to talk sense into her." Uncle Derek, I know you're a good kid. Don't let her ruin the family. Call me. I intercepted the messages because I had instituted a phones on the kitchen counter rule for dinner, specifically anticipating this. When I saw the texts, a cold fury washed over me. He was trying to weaponize my son against me. Mom, is everything okay? Noah asked, looking up from his lasagna. You look scary. I'm dealing with it, honey, I said, deleting the messages and blocking Derek's number on Noah's phone. Eat your dinner. Uncle Derek is just throwing a tantrum because I told him no. Did you really stop paying for their house? Yes. Noah chewed thoughtfully. Good, he was a jerk about the lawn. I smiled, grateful for his teenage clarity, but I knew Derek wouldn't stop at texts. The next morning, Frank, my pie, emailed me the full file. The subject line was simply, Holy SHT. I opened the PDF. As I scrolled, my breath caught in my throat. It was worse than the pool lien, much worse. Derek hadn't just been lazy. He had been systematically dismantling my mother's identity. There were 5 credit cards opened in the name of Joyce Harper in the last 2 years, all maxed out. There was a business loan for Titan Global Enterprises, co-signed by Joyce, with the house listed as collateral. And then, the smoking gun, a power of attorney document filed 3 years ago at the county clerk's office. I zoomed in on the signature. It was witnessed by a notary with a last name I recognized, an old high school buddy of Derek, S., who had lost his license for fraud last year. The power of attorney gave Derek full control over Joyce's medical and financial decisions if she was deemed incapacitated. But the frightening part was the appendix attached to it, a transfer of deed document that had been prepared but not yet filed. He was planning to sell the house. He wasn't trying to save the family home. He was preparing to sell it out from under her, pocket the equity, if any remained after the liens, and likely vanish, leaving her homeless and destitute. I printed the documents. The stack was thick, heavy with betrayal. Then my receptionist buzzed me. Elizabeth, your brother is here. He's making a scene. My blood ran cold. He had come to my workplace. I walked out to the lobby. Derek was there, wearing a suit that was too tight, shouting at the security guard. He looked desperate, his eyes wild. I need to see her. She's stealing my mother's money. Derek yelled, pointing a finger at the receptionist. Derek, I said, my voice cutting through the lobby. He spun around. You froze the accounts. I tried to buy gas today and the card was declined. I didn't freeze anything, I said, walking toward him, flanked by 2 security guards. I just stopped filling the bucket you've been punching holes in. You need to restart the transfer, he hissed, lowering his voice as he saw the guards. Mom is a wreck. She's sick, Liz. The stress is killing her. If she has a heart attack, it's on you. If she has a heart attack, I said, holding up the file I had brought with me. It will be because she finds out you opened 5 credit cards in her name and maxed them out on online gambling and business trips to Vegas. Derek's jaw dropped. You don't know that. I know everything. I have the credit reports. I have the transaction logs. And I have the power of attorney you forged with that crook notary friend of yours. I stepped closer, slamming the file against his chest. He instinctively grabbed it. This is a copy, I said. The originals are in a safe deposit box, and another copy is with my lawyer. You're bluffing, he whispered, but his hands were shaking so hard the papers rattled. Am I? Here, what's going to happen. You are going to leave. You are going to go home and tell Mom the truth. Because if you don't, I'm not just stopping mortgage. I leaned in, my voice a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. I will file a report with the district attorney for elder abuse and identity theft. I will put you in prison, Derek. Do not test me. Derek looked at me, and for the first time, he didn't see his little sister. He saw the senior forensic accountant who had taken down CFOs smarter and richer than him. He turned and ran. He literally ran out of the lobby, clutching the file to his chest like a shield. But I knew him. He wouldn't tell her the truth. He would spin this. He would tell her I was forging documents, that I was the villain. He would try to accelerate his plan to sell the house before the bank took it. I had to get to Mom before he could completely poison her against reality. I had to force the final, public reckoning. I checked the calendar. Sunday was Joyce's 69th birthday. The family dinner was still on the books. Derek wouldn't cancel it. He needed the appearance of normalcy to keep his schemes afloat. That was it. That was the stage. I wasn't just going to bring a gift. I was going to bring the truth, and I was going to serve it cold in front of the only people whose opinion Joyce actually cared about, her church friends, and the extended cousins she tried so hard to impress. Sunday arrived with a sky the color of a fresh bruise. The air was thick and humid, the kind of weather that made your clothes stick to your skin the moment you stepped outside. I had dressed carefully for the occasion. A sharp navy blazer, tailored trousers, and the pearl earrings my father had given me for my graduation, reminders of the legacy I was about to defend by destroying the illusion surrounding it. I left Noah at home. "Order pizza," I had told him, kissing his forehead. "Watch that movie we talked about. I'll be back later." I wouldn't let him witness the demolition. This was adult business. This was a reckoning. When I pulled into the driveway of the estate, the illusion was in full force. Derek had clearly scrambled. The lawn had been hastily mowed, likely by an overpriced emergency service he'd paid for with another one of Mom's credit cards. There were balloons tied to the mailbox. Cars lined the driveway. I recognized the vehicles. Aunt Martha's ancient Buick, the sleek sedan of Reverend Miller, the family pastor, Cousin Sarah's minivan. Derek had stacked the deck. He had invited an audience, knowing, or hoping, that I wouldn't dare cause a scene in front of polite company. He was banking on my shame. He was banking on the Elizabeth who sat quietly at brunch. He didn't know that Elizabeth no longer existed. I walked up the steps, clutching a heavy, gift-wrapped box. It looked like a present. In a way, it was. It was the gift of truth, though I doubted Joyce would see it that way initially. Inside, the house smelled of roast beef and desperation. The dining room was set with the good china, the Wedgwood plates we were never allowed to touch as children. Joyce sat at the head of the table, wearing a sequined dress that was a bit too tight, holding a glass of wine with a trembling hand. She looked regal, but fragile, like a porcelain doll that had been glued back together one too many times. Derek was holding court near the sideboard, laughing loudly at something the Reverend had said. He saw me enter, and his eyes flickered with fear before the mask slammed back into place. "Elizabeth," he boomed, spreading his arms but not moving toward me. "So glad you could make it. We were just about to start the toasts." "I wouldn't miss it," I said, my voice cutting through the chatter. I placed the heavy box on the empty chair next to mine. I took my seat. The tension at the table was palpable. The guests smiled tightly, sensing the undercurrents but too polite to acknowledge them. Joyce wouldn't look at me. She kept her eyes fixed on the floral centerpiece, her knuckles white around the stem of her glass. "All right, everyone," Derek said, tapping a spoon against his glass. The room quieted. "I'd like to propose a toast to the birthday girl, to our mother, Joyce, the rock of this family." He walked behind her chair, placing his hands on her shoulders. She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. "Mom," Derek continued, his voice dripping with practiced sincerity, "you've sacrificed so much for us. And I want you to know, as long as I'm here, as long as I'm running the estate, you will never have to worry about a thing. Titan Global is taking off, big time. And I promise this next year is going to be your best one yet." "Here's here," Reverend Miller murmured. "Actually," I said. I didn't shout. I didn't stand up. I just spoke the word clearly, dropping it into the silence like a stone into a pond. Derek froze. "Liz, not now." "Actually," I repeated, standing up slowly. I picked up the gift-wrapped box. "I think we should talk about what taking care of everything actually looks like, Derek." "Sit down, Liz." "Abeth," Joyce hissed, her eyes snapping open. "Don't you dare ruin this." "I'm not ruining it, Mom. I'm saving you. I ripped the wrapping paper off the box. It wasn't a jewelry box or a photo album. It was a file box. A standard, cardboard banker's box, filled to the brim with documents. I opened the lid and pulled out the first stack, the credit card statements. Derek says he's taking care of you, I said, addressing the table. Cousin Sarah looked terrified. The Reverend looked confused. But did you know, Mom, that taking care of you involved opening 5 credit cards in your name without your permission? I tossed the statements onto the table. They slid across the polished wood, fanning out like a losing hand of poker. What is this? Joyce whispered, staring at the Visa logo. I don't have a Visa. You do now, I said. Maxed out, $25,000 in debt, mostly spent at the Golden Chip Casino and Liquor Barn. She's lying, Derek screamed, abandoning his spot behind Mom to rush toward me. She's forged those. She's trying to frame me. Sit down, Derek, I barked. The command was so authoritative, so unlike me, that he actually stopped. I have the transaction IP addresses. They match your phone, Derek, your phone. I reached into the box again. And here is the mechanic's lien for the pool renovation that never happened. $14,000 stolen. I threw the lien on the table. And here, I said, my voice trembling slightly as I pulled out the final, most damning document, is the power of attorney you forged. I walked over to Joyce. She was shaking, her face gray. I placed the document gently in front of her. Look at the signature, Mom. Look at the date. He signed this 3 years ago. It gives him full control to sell this house if you are deemed incapacitated. I pulled out the unfiled deed transfer. And this is the sale contract he drafted last week. He's not waiting for you to be incapacitated, Mom. He was planning to declare you incompetent, sell the house to a shell company he owns, and dump you in a state-run nursing home. The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Joyce stared at the papers. She touched the signature, her name, written in Derek's handwriting. The betrayal didn't just break her heart, it shattered her reality. The golden child wasn't just a failure, he was a predator. Derek, she whispered, it was a small, broken sound. Is this true? Mom, listen to me, Derek pleaded, sweat pouring down his face. It's complicated, the business needs liquidity. I was going to buy you a better house, a condo, it was for you. You were going to sell my home, Joyce's voice rose, cracking. My husband's home. It's just bricks and mortar, Mom. You don't understand finance. Derek shouted, his mask fully gone now. I needed the money, I deserve it. I've wasted my life taking care of you in this museum. You haven't taken care of anything, I interjected. I paid the mortgage, me, for 6 years, and the moment I stopped last week, the house went into default. Joyce looked at me, eyes wide with shock. You paid. Yes, I said, and I'm done. The money is gone, Mom, he spent it all. The equity is gone, the credit is ruined. Joyce stood up. She was unsteady, gripping the table for support. She looked at Derek, really looked at him for the first time in decades. She didn't see the little boy she had coddled. She saw a 40-year-old thief. Get out, she said. Mom, you can't be serious, Derek scoffed. Where am I going to go? I don't care, Joyce screamed, snatching up a wine glass and hurling it at him. It shattered against the wall, red wine spraying like blood. Get out of my house, you thief, you liar, get out. Reverend Miller stood up, placing a hand on Derek's arm. Son, I think you'd better leave. Derek looked around the room. He saw the judgment in Cousin Sarah's eyes. He saw the disgust on my face. He saw the fury in his mother, S. He sneered. Fine, enjoy the foreclosure, you old hag, you deserve each other. He stormed out, grabbing a bottle of wine from the sideboard on his way. The front door slammed so hard the windows rattled. Joyce collapsed into her chair, burying her face in her hands, sobbing among the wreckage of her birthday dinner and her life. I didn't go to comfort her immediately. I stood there, feeling the weight of the silence. It was tragic, yes, but it was also clean. The rot had been exposed. The fallout was messy, painful, and absolutely necessary. In the days that followed the dinner, the reality of the situation set in with brutal speed. Joyce, to her credit, didn't retreat into denial again. The shock of the forged power of attorney had been too great. For the first time, she listened to me. We spent weeks with lawyers and police officers. I helped her file a formal report against Derek for identity theft, ND forgery. It was the hardest thing she ever had to do, signing her name to the document that would condemn her son, but I sat beside her, holding her hand. "He did this to himself, Mom," I told her gently. "You aren't punishing him, you're just stopping him." Derek was arrested 3 weeks later in a motel 2 towns over. He had been trying to pawn Joyce's jewelry, the few pieces he had managed to steal before he left. He was charged with multiple counts of fraud and elder abuse. He's currently awaiting trial, unable to post bail because, unsurprisingly, no one in the family would put up the money. As for the house, it couldn't be saved. The debt was too deep, the liens too heavy. I refused to bail it out again. I had my own son's future to secure. We let the bank take it. It was a somber day when the movers came. Joyce walked through the empty rooms, touching the walls, saying goodbye to the symbol of her status. But strangely, as she walked out the front door for the last time, she looked lighter. The burden of maintaining that mausoleum was gone. I used my professional network to find her a small, income-based senior apartment in a nice complex. It's 1 bedroom. It has no pool, no grand staircase, and no grounds to mow. But it's hers. It's clean, it's safe, and for the first time in her life, she is living within her means. Our relationship is evolving. She is still Joyce. She still makes passive-aggressive comments about my hair or my car, but the dynamic has shifted. She knows now that I am not the backup plan. She knows I am the pillar. She treats Noah with a tentative respect, perhaps realizing that he is the only future she has left. Noah never mowed the lawn. He finished his soccer season as the top scorer. He's looking at colleges now, and thanks to the money I stopped throwing into the black hole of Derek's ego, I can afford to send him wherever he wants to go. 6 months after the blow-up, on a quiet Tuesday evening, Noah and I were sitting on our patio. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden light over our small, perfectly maintained garden, a garden we took care of ourselves because we wanted to. "Mom," Noah asked, looking up from his homework. "Yeah, bud. Do you miss them being, a big happy family?" I thought about it. I thought about the stress, the obligation, the constant feeling of being used. I thought about the Sunday brunches where I swallowed insults with my eggs. "No," I said honestly. "I don't miss the lie, Noah. We're a family, you and me, and we're happy, that's enough." I took a sip of my tea. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a notification from my bank. "Incoming transfer, $150. Note from Mom for the groceries, thank you." It was a small amount. It barely covered a fraction of what I did for her. But it was a start. It was an acknowledgement. I smiled, put the phone down, and watched the fireflies start to blink in the twilight. I had lost a brother, and I had lost the family estate. But I had regained my dignity, my financial freedom, and the safety of my son. And that was a trade I would make again in a heartbeat. The numbers finally balanced.